Eminenza, il nostro decano. Infatti, come è andata? E la hanno dice della Parolini.
Dicono che quello è il tuo posto. Io ho scaldato il capo e lo trovi già.
Laudetur Jesus Christus. Praised be Jesus Christ. And welcome to Vatican Radio's live-streamed broadcast of Pope Francis' Christmas audience with members of the Roman Kuria. For those of you watching on video, you can see the Holy Father has just arrived. He was wheeled into the audience hall and is now walking up to his throne at the front of the hall. And warmly welcomed with a round of applause by the heads and senior officials of the various dicasteries of the Roman Curia. The audience is taking place in the Hall of Benedictions with a very large tapestry of the Nativity behind the throne. My name is Chris Wells. I will be providing the English language commentary for this morning's audience. And we begin with a word of greeting from the Dean of the College of Cardinals, Cardinal Giovanni Battista Re. Most Blessed Father, in this meeting in which we can already breathe in the gladness and gentle atmosphere of Christmas, I make myself the voice of all present to extend to your holiness the very best wishes inspired by the celebration of the highest event in the history of the world, that in which the Son of God became man, became one of us. Unfortunately, this usual Christmas atmosphere this year is disturbed by the dramatic situation humanity is going through, not only because of the COVID pandemic, which has not yet ended in the world, but above all because of the tragic wars which continue to cause rivers of tears and blood to be shed, as well as generating suffering and anguish in populations on both sides of the countries involved. And among the various wars of particular concern is that which is being fought with atrocious wounds in Ukraine, and which has serious consequences throughout the world. How heavy the sufferings of the martyred Ukrainian peoples weigh on the Pope's heart, as witnessed by Your Holiness's emotion in the recitation of the prayer to Our Lady in Piazza di Spagna last December 8th. Your Holiness has continually raised his voice to make it clear that with war all are defeated, and to emphasize that war is a folly, an unnecessary slaughter, a monstrosity, and you have strongly urged the silencing of weapons and the beginning of peace negotiations. The extensive work done by Your Holiness to come to the aid of the wounded, the homeless, the many people who have been forced to flee, those who are in need of help to survive, should also be highly appreciated. With regard to the Roman Curia, the year that is drawing to a close remains marked by the reform promulgated with the Apostolic Constitution Predicate Evangelium, to preach the gospel, which meets the needs of our time and helps to make the Roman Curia more responsive to its great tasks of service to the primacy of the Pope and service to the bishops and to the Church at this moment in history. There's satisfaction in the Kuria with the increase of laymen and women in various important positions of responsibility which do not presuppose the sacrament of orders. Characterizing the reform above all is a greater missionary spirit and a growing commitment to evangelization, which will lead to making the beauty of the perennial truths of the gospel increasingly well known to the men and women of today, and will benefit a spiritual renewal of the Church. This reform, for which we are grateful to Your Holiness, commits all of us to a deeper spirituality, to a greater dedication, and to a more intense spirit of service. With an intimate sense of responsibility to the Church and toward the world, and with greater intensity, with more intense fraternity among ourselves, which is rooted in the love of God. Throughout the year, Your Holiness, despite the difficulties you've had walking, Your Holiness has been tirelessly active, addressing the turbulent problems of today's society that concern the Church and making apostolic journeys of great significance. The main thrust of the apostolic visit to Canada was the journey of remembrance, of reconciliation, and of healing with the indigenous peoples. The trip to Kazakhstan was an encounter, in addition to an encounter with Catholics of the young nation, also with the heads of other Christian religions, sending a strong message of peace and unity in Christ. The one in Bahrain was also a journey of encounter and of dialogue, an effort to build bridges with the Muslim world, and a meeting with Catholics of various nationalities who are present in the country.
Nei mesi precedenti era stata importante dal punto di vista pastorale la visita apostolica a Malta.
In the previous months, the apostolic visit to Malta had been important from a pastoral point of view. Venerable and beloved successor of Peter, we gather around you in a communion of faith, prayer, and filial affection, wishing you a very happy Christmas and a very happy New Year. That was the address of Giovanni Battista Re, the Dean of the College of Cardinals, who, at the conclusion, goes up to greet our Holy Father Pope Francis, and they embrace and exchange a few words. And now the eagerly anticipated words of our Holy Father, as he addresses the heads and senior members of the Roman Kuria. Your brothers and dear sisters, once more the Lord grants us the grace of celebrating the mystery of His birth. Each year, kneeling before the child lying in the manger, we can look at our lives in this special light. It's not the light of the glory of this world, but the true light which enlightens everyone. The humility of the Son of God who partook of our human condition is for us a lesson in seeing things as they really are. Just as He chose poverty, which is not merely the absence of wealth, but utter simplicity, so too each of us is called to return to what is essential in our own lives, to discard all that is superfluous and a potential hindrance on the path of holiness. This path of holiness is not open to negotiation. At the same time, we need to realize clearly that in reviewing our lives and our past, we should always begin with the remembrance of all the good we have known. For only when we are conscious of the Lord's goodness to us can we also give a name to the evil that we have experienced or endured. The realization of our poverty without the realization of God's love would crush us. Consequently, the interior attitude that we should deem most important is gratitude.
Il Vangelo, per spiegarci in che cosa essa consiste, ci racconta la storia dei 10 lebbrosi che furono tutti sanati da Gesù. Solo uno però torna indietro a ringraziare.
The Gospel, to explain this gratitude, recounts the story of the 10 lepers who were all healed by Jesus. Yet only one of them, a Samaritan, returned to thank him. His act of thanksgiving obtained for him, in addition to his physical healing, complete salvation. His encounter with the goodness bestowed on him by God was not superficial, but touched his very heart. That's how it is. Without a constant exercise of gratitude, we would end up simply cataloging our failures and lose sight of what counts most, the graces that the Lord grants us each day. Much has happened in the course of this year, and before anything else, we want to thank the Lord for all his blessings. Yet we hope that among these blessings is that of our own conversion. Conversion is a never-ending story. The worst thing that could happen to us is to think that we are no longer in need of conversion, either as individuals or as a community. To be converted is to learn ever new how to take the gospel message seriously and to put it into practice in our lives. It's not simply about avoiding evil, but doing all the good that we can. This is being converted. Where the gospel is concerned, we are always like children needing to learn. The illusion that we have learned everything makes us fall into spiritual pride. This year was the 60th anniversary of the opening of the Second Vatican Council. What was the Council, if not a great moment of conversion for the entire Church? As St. John the 23rd observed, the gospel does not change. It is we who begin to understand it more fully. The conversion that the Council sparked was an effort to understand the gospel more fully and make it more relevant, living, and effective in this historic moment. As happened many other times in the Church's history, so too in our own time we felt called, as a community of believers, to conversion. This process is far from complete. Our current reflection on the Church's synodality is the fruit of our conviction that the process of understanding Christ's message never ends, but constantly challenges us. The contrary of conversion is fixedness, or immobility, the secret belief that we have nothing else to learn from the gospel. This is the error of trying to crystallize the message of Jesus in a single, perennially valid form. Instead, its form must be capable of constantly changing, so that its substance can remain constantly the same. True heresy consists not only in preaching another gospel, as St. Paul told us, but also in ceasing to translate its message into today's languages and ways of thinking, which is precisely what the Apostle of the Gentiles did. To preserve means to keep alive and not imprison the message of Christ. The true problem, however, it's one that we often overlook, is that conversion does not only make us aware of evil, so that we can once more choose the good, it also forces evil to change its tactics, to become more insidious, to find new disguises that will be hard for us to see through. The battle is real. The tempter always returns, and he changes his guise when he comes back. In the Gospel, Jesus uses a parable to illustrate how this battle takes place at different times and in different ways. That's what he says. When a strong man, fully armed, guards his castle, his property is safe. But when one stronger than he attacks him and overpowers him, he takes away the armor in which he trusted and divides his plunder. The first major problem is when we put too much trust in ourselves, our strategies, our programs. This is the Pelagianism of which I have often spoken. Some of our failures, in fact, are a grace, for they remind us that we should not put our trust in ourselves, but in the Lord alone. Some of our failings, also as a church, are a forceful summons to put Christ back at the center. For as he says, "Whoever is not with me is against me, and whoever does not gather with me scatters." Dear brothers and dear sisters, it's not enough to condemn evil, including the evil that quietly lurks among us. We need to respond by choosing to be converted. Mere condemnation can give the illusion that we've solved the problems, whereas what really counts is making the changes that will ensure that we no longer allow ourselves to be imprisoned by evil ways of thinking, which are often those of this world. One of the most helpful virtues to practice in this regard is that of vigilance. Be attentive, pay attention. Jesus uses a striking example to illustrate the need for vigilance. Attentiveness to ourselves and to the church. He tells us, when the unclean spirit has gone out of a person, it wanders through waterless regions, searching for a resting place, but not finding any, it says, "I will return to my house from which I came." When it comes, it finds it swept and put in order. Then it goes and brings 7 other spirits more evil than itself, and they enter and live there. And the last day of that person is worse than the first. Our initial conversion follows a certain pattern. The evil that we acknowledge and try to uproot from our lives does indeed leave us, but we would be naive to think that it will long be gone. In short order, it comes back under a new guise. If before it appeared rough and violent, now instead it shows up as elegant and refined. So we need to realize that, and once again to unmask it. Allow me to say that the demon is very refined. That's how these elegant demons are. They enter smoothly without our even being conscious of them. Only the daily practice of the examination of conscience can enable us to be aware of them. For example, in the 17th century, there was the well-known case of the nuns of Port Royal. One of their abbesses, Mother Angelica, had begun well. She had charismatically reformed herself and her monastery, even banishing her parents from the cloister. She is a very gifted woman, born to govern. But she became the soul of the Jansenist resistance, intransigent, and unbending even in the face of ecclesiastical authority. Of her and her nuns, it was said that they were as pure as angels and as proud as demons. They had cast out the demon, but he had returned 7 times stronger, and under the guise of austerity and rigor, he had introduced rigidity and the presumption that they are better than others. He always returns. The demon who has been cast out always returns. Beware of this. Jesus in the Gospel tells us many parables aimed at the righteous, the scribes and the Pharisees, in order to unmask their illusion of feeling themselves just and despising others. For example, in the so-called parables of mercy, Jesus tells the story of the lost sheep and of the younger son of that poor father who considers himself treated as dead precisely by the latter. These parables remind us that the first way to sin is to go off, to go astray, and to do what is clearly wrong. Yet these parables also include those of the lost drachma and the elder son. These parables hit the mark. We can be lost even at home, like the coin of that woman, and we can be unhappy even while formally remaining faithful to our duties, like the elder son of the merciful Father. For those who set out and go astray, it's easy to recognize how far they've wandered. For those who remain at home, though, it is not easy to appreciate the hell that they are living in, convinced that they are mere victims, treated unjustly by constituted authority, and in the last analysis, by God Himself. And this happens a lot, even here in the home. Dear brothers and dear sisters, all of us have had the experience of getting lost, like that sheep, or of leaving God behind, like that younger son, all of us. These sons have caused us humiliation, and for this very reason, by God's grace, we've been able to face them squarely. But this time in our lives, we need to pay greater attention to the fact that in a formal sense, we are now living at home, within the walls of the institution, in the service of the Holy See, at the heart of the Church, of the body of the Church. Precisely for this reason, we could easily fall into the temptation of thinking we are safe, better than others, and no longer in need of conversion. Yet we are in greater danger than all others, because we are beset by the elegant demon, who does not make a loud entrance, but comes with flowers in his hand. If there are times when please forgive me, if there are times when I say things that might sound harsh and pointed, it's not because I don't believe in the value of kindness and persuasion. Rather, it is because it is good to keep our caresses for the weary and the oppressed, and to have the courage to afflict the comfortable, as the servant of God, Don Tonino Bello, liked to say. For there are times when the comfort they enjoy is only the deception of the devil and not a gift of the Spirit. Finally, I'd like to say one last word about the subject of peace. Among the titles that the prophet Isaiah gives to the Messiah is that of Prince of Peace. Never, as at this time, have we felt so great a desire for peace. I think of war-torn Ukraine, but also of the many ongoing conflicts in different parts of our world. War and violence is always a catastrophe. Religion must not lend itself to fueling conflicts. The gospel is always a gospel of peace. And in the name of no God can one declare war to be holy. Wherever death, division, conflict, and innocent suffering reign, there we can recognize only the crucified Jesus. At this time, it's precisely to those who are suffering most greatly that I would like our thoughts to turn. We can be helped by the words of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who from his prison cell wrote, Viewed from a Christian perspective, Christmas in a prison cell can of course hardly be considered particularly problematic. Most likely, many of those in this building will celebrate a more meaningful and authentic Christmas than in places where it is celebrated in name only.
Un prigioniero capisce meglio di chiunque altro che miseria, sofferenza, povertà.
That misery, sorrow, poverty, loneliness, helplessness, and guilt means something quite different in the eyes of God than according to human judgment. That God turns towards the very places from which men turn away. That Christ was born in a stable precisely because there is no room for him in the inn. A prisoner grasps this better than others, and for him this is truly good news. It's a quote from the letters and papers of Dietrich Bonhoeffer from prison, the letter to his parents from 17 December 1943. Dear brothers and dear sisters, the culture of peace is not built up solely between peoples and nations. It begins in the heart of each one of us. Anguished as we are by the spread of wars and violence, we can and must make our own contribution to peace by striving to uproot from our hearts all hatred and resentment towards the brothers and sisters with whom we live. In the letter to the Ephesians, we read these words, which are also found in the office of Compline. Put away from you all bitterness and wrath and anger and wrangling and slander, together with all malice, and to be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ has forgiven you. Let's ask ourselves, how much bitterness do we have in our hearts? What's feeding us? What's feeding it? What is the source of the indignation that so often creates distances between us and fuels anger and resentment? Why is it that backbiting in all its forms becomes our only way of talking about the things around us? If we truly want the din of war to cease and to give way to peace, then each of us ought to begin with him or herself. St. Paul clearly tells us that kindliness, mercy, and forgiveness are our medicine for building peace. Kindliness means always choosing goodness in our way of relating with one another. Besides the violence of arms, there's also verbal violence, psychological violence, the violence of the abuse of power, the hidden violence of gossip. In the presence of the Prince of Peace who comes into the world, let us lay aside all weapons of every kind. May none of us profit from his or her position and role in order to demean others. Mercy means accepting the fact that others also have their limits. Here too, it is fair to accept that individuals and institutions, precisely because they are human, are also limited. A church that is pure and for the pure is only a return to the heresy of Catholicism. Were that the case, the Gospel and the Bible as a whole would not have told us of limitations and shortcomings of many of those whom today we acknowledge as saints. Finally, forgiveness means always giving others a second chance, and the realization that we become saints by fits and starts. God does this with every one of us. He keeps forgiving us. He keeps putting us back on our feet. He always gives us another chance. We ought to do the same. Brothers and sisters, God never tires of forgiving us. We grow tired of asking for forgiveness. For every war to end, forgiveness is required. Otherwise, justice becomes vengeance, and love is seen only as a form of weakness. God became a child, and that child, once grown, allowed himself to be nailed on a cross. There's nothing weaker than one who is crucified. Yet that weakness became the demonstration of God's supreme power. In forgiveness, God's power is always at work. May gratitude, conversion, and peace thus be the gifts of this Christmas. I wish all of you a happy Christmas, and once again, I ask you please to not forget to pray for me. Thank you. The words of our Holy Father, Pope Francis, focusing on conversion, and then on peace, as the Holy Father gives his exhortation to the heads of the Roman Kuria and their principal collaborators in the various dicasteries and offices of the Vatican. Now the Holy Father will give his blessing.
Sin nomen Domini benedictum. Aiutorium nostrum in nomine Domini. Benedicat vos omnipotens Deus, Pater et Filius et Spiritus Sanctus.
And with the Holy Father's greetings and blessing, the audience with the members of the Roman Curia for the exchange of Christmas greetings draws to a close in its formal part. There's now an opportunity for the various officials to come up and greet the Holy Father. They'll be given they're being given a couple of books and documents to take with them to reflect upon. And then later this morning, the Holy Father is going to be greeting the other employees of the Vatican in a somewhat larger and a little bit less formal gathering that takes place later this morning in the Paul VI Hall. In the meantime, we would like to thank you for joining us for this important speech of the Holy Father, the discourse to the Roman Curia for the exchange of Christmas greetings. Once again, my name is Christopher Wells. On behalf of Vatican Radio, I'd like to thank our partners who have helped to make these live broadcasts available throughout the world, including Luminous Radio, Radio Maria Papua New Guinea, Radio Maria England, Catholic Faith Network in America, Shalom World TV, Salt and Light TV, Madarshan TV, EWTN TV, and Catholic TV. For those of you who are following the event on video, you can see the Holy Father speaking with each of the various officials. And then they are given a book. It is The Life of Jesus by Dr. Andrea Tornielli. In fact, one of the leaders of our dicastery here at the Dicastery for Communications. He's just published a book on the life of Jesus. That's one of the gifts the Holy Father is giving to the leaders of the curial offices. In the meantime, thanks once again to our producers and technicians here in studio who make these broadcasts possible. And thanks once again to all of you joining us today, and very happy and holy Christmas for you and your families. For full coverage of the Pope's discourse to the Roman Curia, along with other world and Vatican news, we do invite you to visit our Vatican News web portal, as well as our Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube accounts. And our live coverage of the audience for the exchange of Christmas greetings with the Roman Kuria now comes to an end. Praise be Jesus Christ. Laudetur Jesus Christus.